Welcome back to the Reboot Era, the show about rebuilding after career curveballs and turning uncertainty into momentum. Today, I'm joined by James Calestra, former Forbes leader turned founder of Wonderfish, a podcast booking agency helping founders and creators land the right shows and tell the right story when they get there. We get into what it's like to be laid off after nearly a decade at a dream brand that most of us want to work at and the rest of us probably want to be featured in. We talk about how that kind of shakeup forces you to redefine your identity and why podcasting is one of the most underrated growth channels when you do it with real intention. First, we have a short ad and then we'll hop into the episode. If you're anything like me and you're tired of spending 20 or 30 minutes filling out an application only for it to go to the reject pile, or even using the easy apply button on LinkedIn only for your application to never be seen, well, look no further. JobHire.ai offers you a really cool opportunity where it applies to jobs on your behalf. And if you don't get an interview in the first 15 days, you'll get your money back. Now with this, you can sign up, put in some of your information, and you don't have to constantly repeat that process. You do it one time, you set it, you forget it, and the interviews roll into your inbox. Sign up today, use my code DRAY30, DRAY30 for 30% off.
My name is James Calestra. I live in Cedar Grove, New Jersey, which is not too far from New York City. I'm the founder of Wonderfish, which I launched last year, and it's a podcast booking agency.
Awesome. Well, thanks, James, for coming and being on the Reboot Era podcast. We're so excited to have you here. I have a few questions for you that I think everyone's going to want to ask. So, Forbes, I've seen this on your LinkedIn when we got connected.
Mm-hmm.
You don't work there anymore. What happened? Why don't you work there? Did you love it? Tell us everything.
Yeah, so I actually really loved working at Forbes. I was there for close to 10 years, up until January of 2024 when I was laid off. And I'll be honest, it kind of shook me at my core. I wasn't expecting a layoff. I mean, the media industry in general has seen a lot of layoffs in the past 5 years. And for whatever reason, we were lucky at Forbes where, we were profitable enough that we didn't really see any layoffs. Even through COVID, we didn't have any of that. And I think I don't really know exactly what happened. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of different dynamics that are changing media. AI is definitely a big part of that. Algorithms are changing with Google and how people are finding content and things like that. But yeah, I think I wasn't expecting that to happen, but after it was like go, it kind of it shook me at my core, and it forced me to really redefine my entire identity, really.
It sounds crazy. I want to hear about the story, but also, what did you do at Forbes? Like, were you solely responsible for picking who was on the Forbes 30 under 30 list? Because if so, I'm glad to have you here and I want to fight you.
I wish I could say that. I mean, I was working pretty closely with the editorial team who did make all those decisions, but I was on the marketing side, really on the revenue side. And so we called my department, it was called integrated marketing. So every media company, for the most part, relies on a huge part of the revenue comes from advertising revenue. Besides that, I mean, subscriptions becoming more and more prevalent as far as funding these businesses. But so my team supported the advertising or the media sellers really that were selling advertising. And it wasn't just advertising when we just use that word generally, but it was probably more so content driven, right? Really. So it was like these advertisers or these brands would come in and they would want to essentially sponsor content, either editorial content or their own custom content. And that's what it was really all about. But then we created programs that were really broad across all the different platforms that Forbes operated. So whether it was our live events were really big, obviously our website, Forbes.com, the magazine's, still there. It's definitely not as prominent as it was at one point in time, but that's where everything started. And then you had all those other elements, but that's the core part of what we were delivering. And our team would really package everything together and figure out really the entire strategy, the message, the campaign that would just drive awareness and whatever the goals were. Typically is awareness, traffic to the website, you name it. But what I loved about it was I could be creative. We come up with ideas for everything from thematically, what's the content going to be about? How is it going to align with the strategy of that advertiser? And, we kind of got to quarterback across Forbes, working a lot of different departments and putting these packages, proposals, campaigns together.
Yeah, so boring work is what you're saying. I'm just kidding.
I love the creativity side of things.
Yeah.
I think one of there were boring aspects to it as far as like, the process driven stuff. I mean, I think I saw in your profile on LinkedIn, like you kind of had some experience like working with Asana and different project management. And so like that was one of the things that I had to wasn't I'm not a natural born like process oriented person, but I realized that I had to add that to my skill set in order to, especially as I became a manager, we were very process oriented because we're working off RFPs.
Hmm.
So basically, every time we were working with an advertiser or a brand, they would give us this RFP and they would typically give it to a bunch of different publishers. And we basically were pitching them, right? Who has the best idea? And obviously, there's pricing involved and packaging and all that stuff. But we had to have a really good process down because it was a repeatable thing that happened weekly, daily. These RFPs are coming through. We had to have the right way to kind of address them. So we worked when I was at Forbes. We worked with Smartsheet. It's like I guess a
Okay.
competitor of Asana,
Yep.
but
We've used that
um,
before in different companies that
yeah.
I've
So
worked for.
exactly. So we had to have that process down and have like a repeatable system for handling these sorts of things. And
Yeah.
yeah, I realized how important that was.
Well, so what about your layoff? Like, was it something that happened on a Friday and you got told, hey, there's this email, I got invited to a room and I'm let go? Was it something you knew about way in advance and you had time to prepare? Like, how did it work with Forbes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was a one-on-one thing where and I don't remember what day of the week it was to be honest, but I remember that I just got this invite on my calendar from like two C-suite leaders. I'm not going to say who it was, but two C-suite leaders from Forbes, and I was like, okay, that's not good, and then it kind of made like my stomach drop because I'll just say it was like one of them was from HR, and you're like, okay, that's not good. And so I was like, very nervous. I wasn't sure what this was about because there was no description on the meeting. And I get on the call, it's a Zoom call because we were working remotely since COVID. We could go in if we wanted to, but it was optional. And for the most part, I just worked from home. And so, the call just started off and they said, James, I have some news that's going to impact your role. There's something around like we're managing costs, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And then they just laid it out. They're like, we had to eliminate some departments and positions, and unfortunately, your position was one of them. And it was just like, it just kind of hits you like a train. You're like, okay. And I don't even remember like the rest of that call or like what we even talked about. I may have asked a few questions. I just try to like contain myself and just like, because I think for so long, like I said, I was at Forbes for close to 10 years. You build your identity around your role in your career, which, as stupid as it sounds, it's like, it's just kind of the reality because you spend so much time in your job. You know what I mean? It kind of starts to define you and who you are. And I think there was a lot of things that I really loved about working there. I loved that it was like a brand that I could tell people where I worked and, they recognized it. And it like, even though it was like a massive brand, it was very small, like felt close knit. There was like 400 or 500 people that worked for the company and in the office that we worked. So it was Jersey City because we were in New York City and then we moved to Jersey City. It just felt like, you felt like you knew everyone and I loved a lot of those things. Even knew like Steve Forbes and his daughter Moira. Like my wife actually baked the cake for Steve Forbes' 70th birthday because it was just like a close knit kind of thing. And like we got invited to his birthday party. And so, I worked really closely with the chief content officer and just was really lucky to like I could walk in his office at any point and like if I had an idea and like, hey, throw it off the wall or whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like I just love working there. And I think the next so I actually waited after I was laid off, I actually waited to tell I have two daughters. And at the time they were 8 and 11. They're 3 years apart. And, the 8-year-old, when I told her, she looked at me and she was like, why would they get rid of you? You're the best." And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's like, I wonder the same thing. Like, and it's just like, it just kind of like, I hate to like be like whiny or like try to act like, this big traumatic experience, but it kind of is like when you get, especially when you have kids and you feel like, you let them down in a way.
Yeah. But even if you don't, right? You're letting yourself down,
Yeah.
there's this perception of like, I don't know, you walk out in the world and people, it's a common question, like, what do you do for work? And you're just like, nothing right now. What
Right.
did I do? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm
Yeah.
interviewing, I'm unemployed. Like, it's
There's
terrible.
like a stigma almost.
Yeah.
And so I actually didn't even want to publicly share that I was laid off. But at the same time, there was parts of me, like it was almost like there was mixed emotions too, because, it's like a roller coaster where like there was moments where I was like felt relieved or excited because there was like being on a place for 10 years, there was moments where like I wanted to move internally or maybe even think about going somewhere else because you always kind of want to change or you feel like you're doing there was moments when I was working there where I was like, am I actually growing or like am I learning anything? I'm doing a lot of the same stuff, you know what I mean? And so there was parts of me where after the layoff where I was like excited, you think about like what could be, but then you start applying for jobs and like nothing was happening. Like literally like no interviews for weeks and months. Like it was just dead. And so
Yeah.
I'll get into like launching Wonderfish, but I actually launched Wonderfish more so like out of necessity because I didn't really have any other options. I was like, all right, I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm not going to sit around and just wait.
Yeah.
It was just so difficult. But yeah, I think so back to like the story of like, I didn't really I think my whole identity was kind of tied to Forbes. And so I was just thinking about what I wanted to do and I had a couple ideas and I wanted to like at one point I came up with Wonderfish actually initially as like I wanted it to be like product placement. I always thought product placement was really cool
Hmm.
as a industry and as something like a business. And so I tried that was like the first thing that I tried doing, but it like didn't really go anywhere because it was just I don't know, not something I had a lot of experience in. And then I was
Yeah.
doing a bunch of other marketing related stuff. And then I finally settled on podcasts because podcasts are just such a powerful, um, as you know, like mechanism for getting your stories. And then ultimately what I realized was that my passion was about helping people share their own stories. That's what I kind of was in a way, that's what we were doing as a company at Forbes. It's like
Yeah.
we were platforming people, giving them the opportunity to share their stories. And the people that were basically covered in Forbes or, whether it was on the magazine or on a list or just in an article or whatever, they were really people that were ultimately changing the world. And so always thought that was really cool. Right.
Hmm.
Like, and I was always surrounded by a lot of really prolific and brilliant and successful people. But I had this limiting belief where like I didn't really see myself as one of them, as like someone that could be a founder or be, kind of
Yeah.
at that
There's like
level.
an imposter syndrome, right? Of like
Yeah.
walking around the halls. Yeah. Totally get that.
Yeah, exactly.
So then now what happened? How long were you unemployed or laid off for before you started Wonderfish?
Yeah, so I was laid off in January and then I don't think I started Wonderfish until like April.
And this is 2024.
Yeah, 2024. So I was applying applying some different places and I ended up like I said, I just didn't have a lot of luck with the interviews and just getting just getting interviews was the hardest part, right? Like I might maybe had one or two and it just wasn't going anywhere. And then I started this one company called Props, which is like an ad network. I ended up was connected to the CEO and he was this guy who basically he has a really cool background. He was the first CMO for New York City under Mayor Bloomberg. And I told him like what I did a big part of what I did at Forbes was storytelling. And I was like, I want to go into companies and do like a storytelling workshop basically. And I put it together. Like we looked at different storytelling frameworks and we kind of like put those frameworks through the lens of the company itself. Like basically applied storytelling frameworks and then looked at like your ICP, your ideal customer. And it's kind of like a marketing workshop really. And so I did one for him and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is going to be my new business. And I went and I created a whole offering. And again, it's just like not getting anywhere selling this, like, even though I sold it to this one guy. And so, I was kind of struggling a little bit just to like get Wonderfish off the ground and get more clients. And then I pivoted because a lot of companies were telling me that they were interested in earned media and PR. And so at Forbes, I was doing more paid media, but I said, I'm going to take a stab at this, like basically like PR, earned media, and getting people articles. And so I started to pivot. And then my wife, this is like, I was listening to one of your episodes. It might have been your latest one. There was a guy, Rob, on it. And
Yeah, I love
he
Rob.
started a company called Fanorama. And what stuck out to me is, and I had a similar experience, his wife told him to build it.
Hmm.
Because I had a similar experience with my wife, who, you know, I could tell like she was nervous about Wonderfish. She wasn't sure what was going to happen. And I was clearly nervous about it. I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. And then this was like July, like after the whole thing with, not getting paid to work for like an entire month. She texted me and she was like, just build Wonderfish. She's like, just build it. And it was like that guy, Rob, I think his wife's told him the same thing. Like, just build
Yeah,
it. Like,
just build it. Just do it.
I was like, why not? Like, this is my chance, like it's obviously it's a risk, but I'm going to take it. And I did, like, I kind of, just went all in. And I have I have a business coach, this guy named Diego from Unlock the ROI that helps me. But like having my wife behind me was sort of, I mean, it was massive because, and this is a literal, so that sign behind me, so it says Wonderfish. She actually, right around that same time when she told me to build it, she had that made for me, and she surprised me with it. And she like went on Etsy or whatever, and it's like a real wooden sign. And that was like a literal sign and like a figurative sign that like she was supporting me.
That's awesome. That's
And
good.
yeah, that was really cool. And so I think you need that support. I mean, obviously there's people that do it without it, but like I personally, I don't know if I don't think I'd be where I am, obviously, if, I didn't have her and didn't have the support of my family.
Sure. Yeah, of course. You know, that's a really cool story, but we want to hear about what you do now. So, what is Wonderfish? What exactly do you do every day?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about it. I I'm a booking agency, right? So I'm a middleman between the podcast and the guest of podcast.
Am I
But
supposed to
there's
be paying guests on my podcast? Is that what you're saying? Because this
no,
is
no.
free.
No, so so you as a host, I mean, you're sitting on like as you build your audience, I like to say you're sitting on a gold mine because everyone wants audiences. And so one of the things I learned at Forbes is how hard it is to build an audience from scratch. Like we had our own shows. We had, I mean, still to this day, one of the ones that we launched when I was there, I think one of the most popular is Steve Forbes' What's Ahead. And that's Steve Forbes' show. But I remember like just how long it takes to get more. The metric is always downloads, which I think is a silly, I don't know
Hmm.
why people go off downloads because I don't personally download shows, but
But
that's just
the
kind of
correspondence of a download is actually like a view. So, like when you click it, that translates rather than a view to a download. Plus, it also shows in other media. So, like if Spotify was to have it located there and someone clicks it as play, that's downloading it
they
for them
consider it a
to listen to
download.
it. So, yeah, so they consider it a download. And I feel like there used to just be an ancient metric, right? Where someone would potentially download something, actually physically downloading it to their server, to their place that they're looking at it. So,
Right.
I
Well,
don't hate it, but it took me a minute at the same time. I was like, what is a download? Like, are people
yeah,
taking my podcast and like taking it with them on a trip? Like, I'm confused.
exactly. Well, no, and I'm glad you said that about the views because someone actually mentioned that, and it's good to hear you mention that again because I'm still trying to like I said, it wasn't until July that I focused in on this podcast world, and I'm starting to learn a lot every day. But so there isn't really like a great like Nielsen for podcast. I think listen notes is probably one of the better metrics because they have like the listen notes percentage like ranking wherever, but that's also not perfect, right? And I've reached out to the founder and tried to figure out like how he's actually getting those metrics, and he's not really willing to reveal.
Gatekeeping is what we
Yeah,
call it in the business world.
exactly. So maybe someday I need to like get into more of like the research side of like analyzing these shows, but that's a big part of what I do. So back to Wonderfish, basically what I do to be beyond just like at the core is booking you for shows, but where it all starts is first I start with a workshop to really understand your core, your story, the core essence of who you are, what your story is, who you want to reach, all that sort of stuff. And then I go and do research. And I actually built my own AI tool. So like that guy Rob, like he was saying he kind of did some like vibe coding and Claude or whatever. He was a lot more technical than I am. I'm definitely not like a coder or anything. So the first thing that I did to build my AI tool, because I use AI as like the first line of defense or the first mechanism for researching all these shows, right? Because there's 500,000 active shows, I believe, from what I learned. There's like 3 or 4 million total shows ever registered or whatever, but like 500,000 have published within the last 30 days, I think. And so there's, it's quite a lot. So you have to figure out like which ones make the most sense for my client based off the topical relevance and then like the reach and engagement. So those are like the most important factors, I feel like. So what I did was initially I worked with someone who designed like a workflow in N, which is like
Yep, I'm familiar.
yeah, it's an AI build workflow builder. I'm probably describing it wrong. Again, I'm not technical. And so it was working okay, but it was kind of clunky. So it was like you had to take like it wasn't really finding all the website or all the podcasts. Like you had to like upload a spreadsheet into it and then um, it was fine, but like I wanted it to be a little bit more like a smoother experience. So I actually took a lot of the code that he put together in NAN and I migrated over to this other app called VO, which is made by Vercel. And so I've been using that and I've had success because it allows you to create an app that's more like the UI or the interface, the user interface is like actually looks like an app that you would publish or whatever, but it's not published. It's not published. It's not ready to be published to the broader, community. It's more just for me to use for now, but it allows me to, again, analyze these podcasts and I could actually create like client profiles and then score the podcast based off how well it meets their, each client's criteria. And so I've been having success with that. And, I do the outreach. And I there's a data API that feeds into it. I use one from a company called Taddy. And, that's so yeah, basically finding the podcast. I do use other tools like off the shelf tools. Like one of them that I've from time to time will use is Podmatch. The only reason I started using that is because some of the hosts I would email them and they would say, "Can you just reach out to me on Podmatch? I like to book through there." So I was like, "All right, I'll create it on Podmatch." Podmatch is fine. There's some good things about it, some bad things about it, but overall it's not bad. And so what I do is I find the shows, I pitch them, I work. So that's a big part of what I do is working on the pitch and having a really strong hook. And I can give you examples of that if you want, but basically,
Do it. Give us a pitch. Give
yeah,
us a
yeah,
pitch. What do you do? What do you say?
yeah. So I'll give you an example. So the guy that I will talk about, his name's Mitchell Jones, and he is the founder and CEO of a company called Lava. And so Lava is a startup that I think he started in May of last year. Brilliant guy. He's actually he was on the Forbes under 30 list from his previous company that he started. So Lava is basically a financial layer for AI. So if you're building an AI startup, it allows you to create it's like the payments. So instead of using like Stripe, I guess you would use Lava as like a payment. And when I was talking to him in the initial workshop, one of the questions I always ask is like, um, what's the context or trigger for customers finding you or needing your service or whatever solution you have, right? And one of the things he said like if you're a founder, like he likes to reach technical founders and people building AI startups, and he said, if you're worried about things like, if I was to release this new feature, is this going to bankrupt my company? And that kind of stuck out to me because I'm someone who believes in like the power of emotion and like emotional trigger words and things and like bankrupt my company. I was like, that's pretty like that's kind of like it has like the power to be part of a hook. And so that's what I used to be the hook. So the actual hook that I used for his pitch was founders are shipping AI features that could secretly bankrupt them. And I was like, Mitchell Jones is building the fix. And that's been successful. I've got him on, a handful of really good podcasts and he's just getting started. But that's what I always do is I always lead with like a really strong hook. Like what's the emotional sort of trigger point or whatever. Like another guy that I was working with is an AI strategist, and like everyone's an AI strategist. And so for his hook, I actually said most AI tools are a waste of money because that was one of the things he said. It was like that's what he helps people do. Is this guy Jake Holmes? He comes in and he figures out like what is the best ROI as far as like AI tools. That's what he was helping people with. So yeah, that's a big part of what I enjoy doing is the pitch, coming up with that hook, and then once I get a host to agree to have someone on, because that's really what it is all about. We're borrowing the trust and the audience of a podcast host. They agree to have you on, then I handle all the back and forth and the calendar coordination. But then I'm kind of missing a point. Once they agree to have you on, the next step is basically, so I've already sold through the guest, and then I have to go back to the guest and basically sell through that show and say like, this is the show, do you want to go on it? Because they have the ultimate decision power.
Right. Sure.
And so what I started doing, this actually came up, one of my, I think it was Mitchell. He wanted to know like not only about the show's host, because you want to know how influential that host is. He wanted to know about the guests, because that's like a really strong factor for why someone might want to go on a show, because you're basically ingratiating yourself into that sort of company of like these other individuals that have been on that show. And so I started doing like a guest influence report, and that's another thing AI helps me with, because it could analyze like all the guests and like how much social reach that they have, and like what was the topic of their episode that they went on, and all that stuff. And so yeah, so then they agree to go on it, and then the next step is actually preparing them for the show. So it's another thing AI can help with, but it's looking at that show, some of the topics that they typically talk about, what's the flow of the show, what are the questions, and then I can talk to the host too, right? It's like, what are you going
Right.
to ask? And it typically is like what you said, it's like it's going to be a conversation, right? But it's helpful just to like look at the past shows.
Yeah.
A lot of these CEOs, they don't have time. Like I listen to one of your episodes, like I always recommend that. But these CEOs that I'm typically working with, like they don't have an extra 5 minutes to sit there and do anything because they're just so busy. So it's just basically giving them as much ammunition to go into a show. And then the last part is like basically the content creation. So taking that long form interview and cutting it up into video clips and quote cards or whatever it might be. So that's another thing that I
Yeah.
help people with.
Okay, so you do a lot of stuff is pretty much what you're trying to say. The short version is that James does it all. And if you ever want to be on a podcast and you don't want to deal with trying to find them, go to James. So basically, if I understood you correctly, people who might have a story to share, right? A story to tell, and they are a CEO or they're just a influencer of some sort in some industry, and they might be looking for like, I want to get out there. I want to have my story told. And I don't want to necessarily just go through publications like Forbes or Business Insider or things like that. I want to be on these known or lesser known shows that people might listen to, right? Where the audience fits. And so then you take that and say, cool, thanks for all that input. Me go and find the podcast that would be right for you, or multiple podcasts, and then coordinate between the guest, the person who would be on the podcast, and the host, the person who's going to be hosting the podcast, and say, this is why it's a good fit. If both parties agree, then you prep the person who's going to be joining the podcast, which I love and hate, because it's like the point of the podcast, I feel like so many times, is you want to hear someone in their natural element, right? Like it's like a dating profile. You got time to write your dating profile. You get to say all the right things online. And as soon as you're in that date, it's like, shoot, I can't like make this up. I can't ask ChatGPT, what should I say in this case? So when I have people on the podcast, and I've definitely learned that like people who are a little bit more higher up in their career, they've done this a lot longer. They typically are like, hey, like, what are you going to ask? And it's like, I don't know, show up. Let's find out, because I don't even know what I'm going to ask you. But those are the fun conversations, because we get into tangents and we spiral, and it's like, man, I don't know why I'm telling you about my kids, but here we are. And it's like, cool, like you're a human. That's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear the polished response of like, I'm James and I'm selling you on my platform. Like
Yeah.
you can do that to whoever you're selling it to. This is just fun to learn about your layoff and learn about what you do today, and look at your Vineyard Vines shirt, which, side note, I'm from the East Coast, love Vineyard Vines. I never see it on the West Coast, and I'm so
That's
sad. I live in
funny.
Idaho now, and like,
Where on the East
yeah,
Coast are you from?
I'm from Vermont.
So I actually interviewed for I always liked Vineyard Vines. I went to Stanford to interview there after college, didn't get a job there. But
Yeah, I've only know one person ever in my life who was able to intern at Vineyard Vines. And like this person, her name's Alexa, bless her heart. I don't think she'll ever listen to my podcast, but she looks like the people in the catalog. Like I was like, okay, it makes sense. And she showed me her little intern picture of who was there for the internship. And I literally was like, so you all are just like in the magazine all the time. Like you aren't picking people who look just out of the ordinary. It's kind of like an Abercrombie and Fitch. That's what I hate about the design world. But you know, maybe one day I'll have someone in design come to the podcast. I mean, who
yeah.
knows?
But you're absolutely right. I mean, the best conversations are when you just riff off different stuff. Sorry, that's my dog barking. But yeah, I think the reason I do like to prep or give a prep doc is like it's more about making the person feel confident, because confidence is going to just like win
Yeah,
at the end of the day. Even like I do think it's important to have a couple stories in your pocket. You want to call them sales stories. Like, so my story about Mitchell, like I had to kind of remember that. And so
hmm,
remembering things that you know are going to help get your message and your story out there, or like remembering the story about the Forbes thing. Like, yeah, obviously that's ingrained in, the layoff is ingrained in my head, but like
yeah,
writing down maybe like a line or something that you could say, I think. But for the most part, like, yeah, obviously just riffing and being yourself. And the more shows that you go on, the better you're going to get.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is, to be honest, this might be like my seventh podcast. Like
Well, I was gonna ask you that actually. I was
yeah,
gonna say because I have only hosted. I've never guest, and someone just gave me the advice. They were like, "You should be a guest on podcasts," and I was like, "Really?" But I have my own. Like, why would I do that? And they're like, "To get the note out there, to get the message out there," and I was like, "Oh, that's a good idea." And then lo and behold, I have this partnership with JobHire.ai, which hence the hat. You know,
yeah, I was going to
I
ask you
love them.
about
They're great. We can talk about that. But they were like, they actually just set me up and I had an interview with Business Insider. So that was super exciting. And the whole time I was like, oh my God, do you have like notes? Do you have questions that they're going to ask? And they were like, yeah, like kind of, but like just go into it naturally. And I was like, honestly, I podcast host all the time. It can't be that much different to be the one being asked the questions. And it was really fun and it wasn't different. I loved it. It
that.
was awesome.
I think you should. Some of my clients do have their own shows. I'm going to tell you something quick that I've been thinking about. I'm actually going to write about this on LinkedIn, maybe from Monday. So you're familiar with Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah.
Tony
Yes.
Robbins obviously has like his own massive platform. He's got a podcast. I think he's over two, I think he's got like 2.4 million subscribers on YouTube. And every year he does this thing. It's like the Rise Summit or something like that. It's like a 3-day event. I think it's January 29th. And I keep seeing him for the past month. He's been on all these podcasts and like massive podcasts, you know, because he's Tony Robbins, but like he was on like School of Greatness, Jay Shetty, Mindset Mentor, Diary of a CEO. I wrote these down because I'm going to write about it. Big Deal by Cody Sanchez, and when another one, a couple that I hadn't heard of, like the iced coffee hour clips, motivation code, whatever. And what he's doing, it's part of like a campaign. So he's seeing it as like a way to obviously reach new audiences and collaborate with these existing platforms, existing shows. And then he's doing like YouTube collaborations. So if you look at the video from like Diary of a CEO or whoever it might be, Mindset Mentor, there's a way that we could do like a collab similar like on Instagram or whatever, where you collab with another creator. And so it's like cross audience reach, I guess you could call it. And yeah, I think it's a really smart way, because like if you're like you want to build your own podcast, like where's the best place to reach podcast listeners? Like on podcast, right? So, I think it would be smart for you. Not that I'm trying to sell you, like, that's, you don't even need to use me. You can go pitch yourself. But I think that could be really cool because, and again, like he's going on all those massive shows. I think there's a lot of value and smaller like niche shows too, because it compounds the reach, just like built through time. And another thing I want to say quickly, because like you talked about like, oh, you could go on Business Insider, Forbes, like I think that's fine to get reach and get covered. And the thing that I love about podcasts and what I'm doing is it's kind of it's a system, but it's a consistent way to have like call it like always on, or like a cadence of like steady appearances. Whereas like if you were to try to go pitch yourself and get in Business Insider or get in Forbes, like you can do it, but it's going to be much more sporadic, especially if you don't have like a sort of event, like you didn't do something that was like newsworthy or whatever. You're just trying to get profile pieces. It just takes a lot more time. Whereas getting on podcasts, like it's something you could literally do like every week. And so I feel like things that you can do more regularly or more often or more consistently, those are the things that are going to compound and build your audience and things like that. And so that's what I love about podcasts, because there's so many of them, and then just like a great opportunity just to get out there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I'll take it into consideration. I also have a job right now, so it's kind of hard to like
Yeah.
do all of that. But, that being said, what is next? What are you doing next? What's the next steps? What are you looking forward to in 2026? I think that would be really cool for people to understand a business that you started in the background, didn't put a lot of effort into,
Yeah.
eventually said, hey, my wife's kicking me in the butt, because that's what she did. And then now you've been putting all of your effort into it, which is awesome. So now what's next? What does that roadmap look like?
Sure. So I mentioned how important having good processes are. So a lot of what I did in the first year building this has just been about getting a really good system down. And I use HubSpot for my CRM. And so I just hired this company that they're going to help me with a lot of like automations, because I want to try to automate a lot of the repeatable things. Like once something gets confirmed, an email goes to the guests and things like that. I could sort of automate or whatever. But as far as some of my goals for building this, because obviously I want to scale, get more clients and all that sort of stuff. One of the things I want to do is, like, instead of just doing a lot of like one-on-one sales calls, which obviously takes up time, like it's great and I'm not opposed to it. I want to start to do more like one-to-many opportunities. LinkedIn Live, I think, is a really great way to do that. I want to start doing more like information sessions. So I'll be like, hey, maybe I have like once a week, come to my LinkedIn Live thing. Obviously do more podcast guesting myself, so that's part of what I'm doing to get out there. And then eventually I also want to do like sort of, I guess you call it webinars or workshops, and help people, because I am passionate about helping people. It's not just about like I want to make money and build a business, but a lot of people that I talk to are like people like yourself, or solopreneurs, or people that might not necessarily have like a massive budget to spend like 2 or 3K in a month or whatever. And so for people like that, I want to eventually, like, I need to build up to this, but I want to have like a workshop. And I'm talking to a lot of people that could join, and I want to bring in experts like speaking coaches and things like that. But as far as what I would do in the workshop, it's really all about like teaching people and guiding them of like, how could you do this yourself? Like, so you don't necessarily need a booking agency, and giving them the tools. Maybe I'm giving them like custom GPTs or prompts or whatever it is to like help with certain, how to analyze the show, all that sort of stuff. So that's on my roadmap. But right now I'm just focused on delivering, obviously, for the clients that I have, getting some more clients, building the systems, having repeatable, adding in automation where I can, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds really cool. Is there anything that you haven't shared that you want to share as a guest on the podcast that we could highlight?
Yeah. So one of the things I want to just say, just how important, the reason why I'm passionate about this is just how important storytelling really is today. And not only that, but just like being human, because of the fact that AI is really taking over, and a lot of stuff, a lot of content out there is now becoming a lot more sort of synthetic, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, for anyone listening that wants to basically become more influential, which is probably everyone, I think focus on the, like I said, the emotional trigger points, the parts of your experience that you can share that maybe are a little bit more vulnerable. Like, I didn't want to share my story about the layoff. I actually was inspired by, I need to give her credit, Nicole Ramirez, who she was also laid off from Forbes, and she has like over 30,000 followers on LinkedIn now. She's built quite a following, and I was helping her get on podcasts, and she shared the story of her layoff, and she kind of inspired me to share my own story. And once I shared it, all these people kept messaging me and saying, "Oh, that really resonated." So you never know, like, your story might really help someone. But think about like what part of your story is kind of like, I guess, impactful, or like really had a big meaningful, like what's the most meaningful moment. And it might not be something as massive as a layoff or whatever, but the reason I think human stories are important is it's just kind of how we see the world. And I think evolution, like there's an evolutionary sort of science behind it, because we need, almost as like a way to survive. Like I think if you were to go back like the caveman days, like you didn't want to take risks as, if you didn't have to, if someone could tell you a story or tell you like, how they went and killed the bison or whatever, like I think it helped. There's kind of like a science behind it, I think, or I know there is. I don't necessarily know how it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like that access to power, access to money, access to knowledge. And I think that you're absolutely right. And I don't get political, I don't get religious, I don't get into all of those things. But I live in Idaho now, and it's very religious. It's all about Christianity. But I think about this and I'm sitting here going, why was religion never super, appealing to me? Why didn't I go to church every single day, every single
Yeah,
week, whatever? And I think that the big thing here is like some people don't know right from wrong. They don't have this life experience that showed them this is why you shouldn't do a thing. So a story, right? Someone teaching you these principles in a way that you kind of recite them and you go through it can be so powerful. The same thing with politics, right? It's like we learn from our past, like rules and laws that were set. Did they work? Did they not work? And so that's why I think storytelling is so important. And it appeals to people who like might not ever get that worldview, right? I've never been a billionaire. Do I like to read stories about billionaires? No. Do I like to read stories about how they became a billionaire? Absolutely. Because like
right.
I want that knowledge. And I think that that's the really important piece around this. When it comes to layoffs, I think where this like really resonates is a lot of people want to understand the decisions that are made, right? I've never had a seat at the table. I don't typically get to be the one saying, this is who we should lay off. This is why we're doing a layoff. I want to learn that. And part of my podcast was I wanted to hear other people's stories because not everyone has access to people who have been laid off. Not everyone understands what that's like or what you're about to go encounter for the next few months or weeks or years, depending on the time and the economy. But I just had someone who was on the podcast and the episode hasn't aired yet, who was able to give some of that context around like, why do we do layoffs and like what decisions are being made and what conversations happen, which is so interesting. It's like, I never thought of it that way. Do I still hate layoffs? Absolutely. I'm still against them. And I hope I go down in history. Like that should be on my gravestone. Like, don't let there be another layoff. But I think it's really great. And I appreciate all of your context and perspective that you've given on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
I do like to end the podcast with one last question, if that's
Okay.
cool.
Of course.
Are you open to people connecting with you on LinkedIn? If they hear this, they resonate and they love your story and they just want to like follow you or reach out with
100%.
questions.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. You could find me, James Callistra. I think I'm the only James Callistra in the world. There's other Callistras. It's actually a name from Italy, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but if you look up the Wikipedia page for Zangarona, Italy, it's where the Callistras come from. All the mayors, like through back in time, were Callistras. So it's a very small town, but I believe I'm the only James. So spelled Colistra. You could find me on LinkedIn, and wonderfish.xyz is the website. I wish I had a better call to action, because that's one of the things I talk to people about is like eventually maybe next week I'll have this on my next podcast. I want to have like a guide that people can go and download. I haven't done. It's been on my to-do list. Like go download my
Yeah.
free guide. So maybe by the time they listen to this, I'll have a free guide on wonderfish.xyz.
That was James, founder of Wonderfish. If you took anything from this episode, let it be this. Your story isn't a side note, it's leverage, and it might be the exact thing someone else needs to hear. You can connect with James on LinkedIn. He says he's the only James Callistra you'll find. And check out wonderfish.xyz. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone navigating a career pivot. Leave a quick rating or review, and follow the Reboot Era so you don't miss what's next. I'll see you in the next one. As a reminder, I'm partnering with jobhire.ai. You can use AI to find a job. If you don't get an interview in the first 15 days, you'll get your money back. The way it works is you actually fill out your information one time, you select the jobs you want to apply to, and it applies to jobs on your behalf. You set it, you forget it, and you let the job interviews roll into your inbox. If you want to give it a shot, you can use my code DRAY30, DRAY30 for 30% off.